Monster Truck Sunday. What's up?
How you doing, Crab? Good to see you.
Well, Joe Biden not only owes the both of us $600, but also an extra hour of sleep. Now,
Sure. Yeah.
this is some bullshit. I'm
Yeah.
I'm really not. I'm gonna like the lighter days though. To be honest with you, there's something really depressing about it getting like dark at like 4 o'clock.
Well, at least now it's gonna be lighter later, so you can enjoy
Yeah,
the
that's what I'm
afternoon.
saying. That's what I'm saying. It was like I hate the other way around. We should just keep it
Oh,
like
okay. You
this.
hate
We should just stick to one because it's gonna. I mean, it's messing with all of us
right. Yeah. It's gonna
to
be
some degree.
yeah. It's gonna mess up my internal clock for the next week. So, but yeah. So thing
And the Vanguard
happened.
owes you $10.
Yeah.
It seems
Well,
like.
let I had to speak on this. Actually, I really don't.
That's
But here's the thing.
Give
Um,
these fucking pricks
I didn't.
attention.
I honestly did not want this to be as big as it is, um, because I don't watch Vanguard that often, if at all. I just happened to come across their stream last week talking about Marianne, and obviously, there's a lot of chatter around Marianne and her run. Personally, I don't see the point given how the system is rigged. I personally believe that we really should be focusing on, coalescing labor. I think that's the biggest thing that we need to do right now. That's kind of the actions that I'm trying to do on the ground here in DC. So, and the reality is Vanguard wasn't going to respond to me in their chat without me giving a super chat. And as people saw, they were kind of, shitty, with their response. And just as BTS, Keaton, who we see in the chat, what's up, Keaton? He DM'd me and asked if he can use my super chats as basis for their segment that they were doing. That they just premiered or later on this week. So shout out to New Dissonance for having my back and, just really trying to explain, probably in a better way than I could, my intention. Um, but I just felt like I had to kind of speak from my perspective, but it also just kind of, in regards to that, but it also just gave me an opportunity to kind of go down memory lane because they brought up the nihilism, talking point, which we heard of a lot last year. I actually referenced an article last year regarding nihilism, and this was at our beginnings when I first started INN News. And I remember you, Crab, in the chat, you had some things to say about that article, and you being more of a philosopher. I figured this would be a good opportunity for you to kind of share out your takes on that. And then you brought me another clip that also kind of tracks into the article somewhat that I kind of referenced last year. So it's
I
going to
think it's really like it's kind of like a misunderstanding on Kyle Kalinski's part of like fundamentally what nihilism is. I mean, I don't claim to be a philosopher, but I did go to I double majored in philosophy.
hmm
So I mean, like I have like 400 level degree court like under my belt. So I have at least some like a little bit of a background of it. I really just think it's like a definitional failure on
right.
a lot of these people who just have no idea what they're talking about. And really, I mean, the van the what bothers me is the Vanguard's lack of intellectual honesty and like the ability to engage in any sort of genuine way because these people don't even give the benefit of the doubt to you. And me being like I would assume like as young as these guys,
Yeah.
uh, even I don't claim to know everything and
Right.
act as pompous as these pricks do.
Right.
I don't claim. I never do I claim like I try to remain as intellectually open as I can and ask more questions than I do assume answers. And I feel
Right.
like these people they just know, they feel like they know it all. They have all of the correct takes, and that they can never be wrong, or they can never be open to any other sort of ideas. But
Right.
yeah, you want to
I
jump
just
into this?
think I just think for me, actually being an activist um, on the ground, and this is kind of my point, and I think Keaton and Russ also kind of made this point as well. I cannot, in good confidence, if I were to kind of push the idea of Marianne on the people that I work with, knowing that, and everyone admits it's a long shot, so why do I want people that I am advocating for to put their faith and hope into someone that is not likely going to, number one, win the primary and not even close to win the presidency, when their energy can be invested in something else locally or within their state, so they're able to get a win in terms of what they're able to do more directly, in a town or a city or whatever. That's kind of where my focus is right now. And and I said this to people all yesterday, whatever happens to Marianne or anyone as far as this upcoming presidential election is not going to change anything that I'm doing on the ground. Like, in a way, I'm not pressed about this because I am not that concerned about the presidential election. My concern is what's happening locally in DC and what I'm able to do and try to elevate some of the issues here with some of the privilege I have to talk to my councilmen and women here. But the issue is that focus is going to be sapped away from people talking about her and Biden and all the politicians on the federal level, that everyone's just going to focus on them and then take the air out of people who are activists on the ground, who are trying to do the work here. So that's my issue. And I think, and again, Do Dissonance also brought that issue, which I definitely agree with. But so just my issue with this in terms of supporting Marianne or any politician, at this point. So do you want to just get into it in terms of reacting to Do Dissonance, reacting to my super chat, and and I'll be interested to hear your takes on this.
I like Keaton describing in the sense of like trying to save these people because they're in for a molehill of disappointment. You don't understand how badly Marianne is going to lose. Like frankly, they don't. And
all right,
really, it's the political demoralization and spanking that the left is going to get after this that people are trying to like signal the sirens for. But yeah, let's just watch them.
Okay.
So we're not done yet, folks. We're not done yet, folks, because they said what they had to say about us, and that's fine. Whatever. They happen to get a super chat from a good friend of the show named Collin Radix-Carter. You guys, a lot in the chat probably know Collin from the Indie News Network. Guy. Very sweet guy, very nice guy, very smart guy. He's got a good show of his own. He was feeling very, very generous and decided to give them a super chat pushing back on their Marianne narrative. So let's pick this up at Collin's super chat here.
And for the $10, name one YouTube personality who says to sit on their hands. If Marianne Williamson used her platform to push mutual aid, third parties, etc., that would be one thing. But she's running in a system that she said is rigged.
Okay, let's just, because you read that very fast. So of course, the straw man that a lot of the Marianne stands give you is, well, if you're against Marianne, that means you have given into despair and hopelessness. And what Collin makes the point here, and he gave $10 of his hard-earned money to make this point. It was a noble sacrifice, my friend. Even though it went to the wrong hands, it was a noble sacrifice because they wouldn't have read this if you didn't put $10.
It was a sacrifice play.
Well done. I'll hit you back on your, because now you guys have monetization, so we'll hit you back with a super chat. We'll make up for that. You shouldn't have to suffer any more than you did. Name one YouTube personality who says to sit on their hands. In other words, who's telling you to just disengage rather than support Marianne? If she used her platform to push mutual aid, third parties, etc., that'd be one thing, but she's running in a Democratic primary. This is going to go nowhere. Your efforts are better spent on mutual aid and third parties and outside movements, things like that. So here's their answer.
So yeah, so hope you didn't lose that. But yeah, that was kind of, and obviously I can say a whole lot there in a very limited character limit, you know. But essentially, my point was, it would be one thing if Marianne used her platform to elevate what people like me are doing, you know, in terms of, you know, talking about the need for mutual aid, talking about the need to, and people were like, well, you can't run for a party because, you know, and the Vanguard says this later, like, they're not viable right now. Well, of course they're not viable right now, but everyone agrees that we need to make third parties viable. So why not do the work to help them be viable? And I will also argue that third parties, depending on the state, actually do pretty well. For anyone locally who runs independent, depending where you are, actually do well. So it's not about the idea of, again, I wasn't saying sit on your hands and just kind of bitch about it. It's the idea of like, no, people are actually doing the work right now that Marianne's not necessarily going to highlight. Marianne is just going in to kind of talk about just being a Bernie 2.0. With the addition of talking about reparations, which I've said in previous streams, it's pandering to me, because there's no way they're going to talk about reparations, especially in terms of Black people, without talking about the system. You know, you have to destroy capitalism in order to even come close to even have the idea of having reparations for Black people be a thing. So
even the third party thing, I feel like just telling people that third parties straight up don't work. I mean, say what you want about the level of corruption and rigging within actual elections in the United States, but if everyone, like, with the amount of political dissent that we have right now amongst the two parties that people are sick of, and frankly, like, we're in the time of our history where the majority of people would vote for a strong independent as opposed to a Democrat or a Republican, it would only make sense to have just everyone coalesce around the independent candidate and vote for, and or at least like pose some sort of threat to these people.
Right. I think it's just more or less the idea of, okay, well, my frustration is no one wants to do the work to make an alternate party viable, because, as Anna Kasparian says, it's not sexy. It's easier to push your hope upon one person and have people like fawn over that person to donate and like having them talk about the issues, versus actually thinking in terms of, okay, half the people in this country are independent and are willing to invest in a third party. So what better time to make that investment in terms of building that up in the course of coalescing labor around demands that we can actually make and hold our politicians accountable for. That's what I would like to see. And that has to start on the local level first and build from there. So I just feel like Vanguard and like Crystal, Kyle, you know, just essentially, and really what makes me upset is that we are not the people that they're pushing this on. They're pushing Marianne on like the progressive white suburbanite class who, you know, like, and I could say this anecdotally because when I during the marches for Medicare for All, like I you know, I was passing out and flyers like maybe like a few days before the actual event in DC. So I ended up in Capitol Hill. Those of you who know Capitol Hill in DC, that's basically old DC. That's basically where the politicians live, if like some of them, and like a lot of old money in that section of the city. And I ended up talking to, I forgot who it was, but it was an older gentleman and his wife in the park. And you know, and we were talking about Medicare for All and the need for it. But then when they saw that Marianne was going to be a keynote speaker, they got all excited and they were just like, oh, like, you guys should have said something before because we could have helped to promote Marianne, you know, to our people and all of that. And it was just interesting. That was the first time I think I kind of realized that, you know, they were more interested about Marianne versus like the issue. Not to say they didn't care about the issue, but like they really got excited over the fact that Marianne was going to be a keynote speaker, you know, at our event in DC. So if I were like in another section, like let's say Southeast, which is typically like a part of Southeast where it's low income, I don't think I would have gotten that same response. So it's really for the white suburbanite class who say they're progressive, that don't like Biden, but they like the idea of having a challenge because it kind of more aligns with their issues, but it won't necessarily be affected by them if Marianne doesn't win, you know? So that's kind of the issue that I have with all of this, is who Marianne is catering to. She's not catering for people like me or lower income people or the working class. She's catering to basically the affluent class, who are the people I would argue you shouldn't really be reaching. You know, you should be reaching more to the disenfranchised, which often are the working poor and people of color.
Yeah, like I was like the Vanguard, honestly. If you guys want to be pushing Marianne this hard, go get a studio, start a Breaking Points network. Why don't you like actually look like you're trying to parrot mainstream media instead of you're sitting in your apartment with $50 podcast mics? They're in the wrong space for this. They're in the completely wrong space. The level of which their head is at in terms of just going to show where their faith in electoralism is at this point. It just says it all. But
you can keep going.
Oops. Not sure.
Never gonna let a progressive win in the Democratic Party. Bro, do you think they're gonna let a fucking third party candidate win either?
Okay, bro, that's not the point, bro. Bro, the point is, bro, that when you run outside the Democratic Party, bro, you get to appeal, bro, to the 250 million plus Americans, bro, who are not registered Democrats, bro. You understand what I'm saying? When you run in the Democratic Party, you are only appealing to the 30 million
Keaton, I love you, bro.
or so Democratic primary voters, which is very limiting for a sincere left movement. Because if you actually want to mobilize working people, you have to mobilize and engage with people who are not invested in Democratic primary politics, since Democratic primary politics has proven a barren wasteland for working class politics. And so, no, you are not going to win this year as a third party or even as a labor movement or anything like that. But guess what? Morons, you're not going to win this year with Marianne fucking Williamson. So it doesn't matter. That's not an argument. That's not an argument. Unbelievable.
No, they're not. They're not going to let a fucking third party candidate win. They never have. They never will. Does that stop me from voting third party? No, it doesn't. I voted for Jill Stein. I voted.
All right, very good. I'm going to skip ahead to
Zach voted for Joe Biden, and he's twice, and he's admitted to this.
Yes.
Well, not twice, but
Yes.
Russell's son here.
Herself. I can't support her. I just don't quite understand how that's realistic, man.
Let's see what your boys got here.
Yeah, and also name one YouTube personality who says to sit on their hands.
That's
Of course,
why
they're
I
not telling you to
abandoned
sit on their hands. They're just not telling you what the fuck to do. They want to stir.
Okay, this is just absolutely outrageous.
Disenfranchising herself. I can't support her. I just don't quite understand how that's realistic, man.
Yeah, and also name one YouTube personality who says to sit on their hands. Of course, they're not telling you to sit on their hands. They're just not telling you what the fuck to do. They want to stir up all your anger and then give you no direction. So the only thing that you do to protest is watch their fucking show. It's exactly what MSNBC.
Okay, that is blatantly,
okay. Yeah.
flagrantly untrue. That is an outrageously dishonest thing to say. You are either completely ignorant or you're a liar. Frankly, I don't know which is true in this case because you have a proven track record of being both pathetically ignorant and extremely dishonest when it comes to characterizing what other people say. Now, they're not talking about us.
I'm pretty sure they Googled worker strike back on the spot. I just don't think they don't know what
did,
they're talking
and
about.
we'll get to that.
I don't think.
but
I think
yeah.
all of their attention is focused on the Kyle and Crystal stuff.
Yeah, but
That-
again, and Keem made this point later, like because they're mentioning RBN here. They're basically saying, they don't mention anything. And I think it's kind of ironic because if they did their research, and because they did do their research real quick on this stream, when I threw them the second super chat regarding Kashama Sawant, like Gavin had to check to see what I was talking about. Like, if they were a little more active rather than focusing on the drama, they would have known that Nick was speaking at her kickoff event in Seattle last weekend. But even without that, and I think just showing how much they kind of disengage with people who are in the space who actually do the work. Like, as Keen said, Rome is currently building a library right now in Detroit. Savvy is currently doing some activism on the ground in Boston. I do advocacy work for teachers here. And actually later on today, I'm going to be interviewing one of my colleagues to talk about what we're doing regarding teacher retention in DC. And some of the things that, being in the space that we're kind of talking about, I've been able to kind of bring out to my councilmen here, like in terms of teachers, stuff like affordable housing for teachers, student loan debt for teachers. So some of that stuff, that I've been talking about and kind of seeing in this space, I've been able to translate with my, with my organization to bring those issues up. So there are people in the space that are actually doing the work, but of course they're not going to listen to me, or anyone else. So as Keen said, they're being very disingenuous here, either out of ignorance or they know and are choosing not to say because it doesn't fit their narrative of being like, oh, RBN sucks or whatever else. So, Keen was correct in saying this is very disingenuous on their part because no one is saying to not do anything. There are plenty of people, even like Chris Legion, who was a part of our network. Indy, shout out to him, read his Substack article a couple of weeks ago. And Chris mentioned, I'm trying to raise money to open up a laundromat in my town so people who need to wash their clothes can do it for free. So these are the little things that people are trying to do actively as far as mutual aid or whatever their giftings are to try and help people readily on the ground right now. But of course, they're not going to mention all of that because, it'll kind of go against what they're talking about as far as pushing all our hopes onto this rich woman who is not going to get far in the primary. And again, it's not going to elevate these issues at all in terms of what activists are actively doing.
Yeah, the Vanguard should just really be honest and just come out as full-on entertainers because their focus is on vanity. It's all pure vanity.
Right.
Their hyper fixation on electoralism just shows the whole ass of like what this is about. It's about getting into, it's ironic they bring up the MSNBC part because they want to be MSNBC.
Right.
That's the whole. I mean, why else? I don't see any mention of any sort of on the ground, like you said, like either like housing activists or mutual aid things that are actually happening. And rather at every turn, the last time I heard of these guys, they were shitting on the rally. So I mean,
Right. Like the reason why I did that, and again, I've said this before. The only reason why I went into this like in this space initially, because like those of you know, I kind of started with my own personal channel, Kamano Kwano, which I plan to at some point, but to focus on issues within Africa and the Caribbean, issues that people are not talking about at all, you know. But the initial idea for me, you know, coming into INN News, in part, and I think this is kind of why Indy asked me to be a part of the network, was because given my experience as a teacher / activist, to being able to elevate, you know, those issues in terms of what I do, you know, but then, you know, being able to kind of be a model of, you know, and I don't want to call myself out in this way, but, you know, because I don't admit to knowing a lot, especially in regards as politics. And that was actually my concern. Doing this is, again, I always feel like I have, you know, almost like disqualification for doing this quite a bit. But I do have my experience as a teacher. I do have my experience as an advocate, you know, for the past 20 years of being in education, that I've been actively doing this work. And so for me, it's the idea of trying to elevate the issues that I care about as a regular guy who just happens to care, and seeing the connection that our federal politics has on me ultimately, just being able to elevate those and trying to encourage people, you know, like you can do the same thing in terms of what you're passionate about, but you have to think locally first. And that's kind of the message that I try to bring, you know, to INN, and especially in terms of, you know, like INN News trying to elevate a lot of those stories that, you know, people may not necessarily talk about. So, and again, if the Vanguard were more engaged and actually talked to us who actually do this work, they would think differently, I think. But you're right. This is more entertainment for them versus the idea of elevating. And again, if you're for that, that's one thing, you know, like nothing necessarily wrong with that. But don't try to brush us in one stroke, being like, oh, you guys are entertainers too, so therefore you guys don't know anything. No, actually, for me, Zach, Gavin, I actually do this work that you claim that, you know, that I don't do or refuse to acknowledge.
You're unionized too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of this comes from our experience. Like, I mean, I remember at the rally, Garland opening up about his longshoreman father. My dad's a longshoreman also, which is like the most unionized, like the most like, you know, leftly like unionized place in the country, pretty much.
Yeah, my stepdad was a bus driver and a truck driver, and my mom's a nurse, so very much working labor. So, you know, so I've grown up with that idea of like being active, you know, on the ground. And even though like I'm middle class, you know, being as a teacher, you know, like I kind of consider myself part of the working class, you know. So I understand these issues, I think in a lot of ways, a lot more intimately, especially being a part of the union. You know, I just had to fight basically for a raise, you know, like, so these are issues that are important to me, you know, that I'm able to kind of channel and being like, this is what we need to do. And so, yeah, so again, it's just kind of disingenuous of these guys to kind of say, oh, you know, don't know what you're talking about because you're entertainers like us. No, actually, I know a lot more than you guys because I actively do that work, but they don't know that. So they're just kind of making the assumption that in what I'm saying is just kind of is easily dismissible.
Yeah, it's patronizing as hell. You want to keep watching this?
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
I don't think we're on their radar that much. There's no doubt what Zach is talking about here is the Revolutionary Blackout Network, because they have a hard-on for RBN. And so they are saying right here that RBN is not pushing any sort of outside strategy in terms of outside movements or mutual aid. Rome
Are you
RBN,
telling me that a couple of Kansas City white boys have an issue with working class black men and their channel?
Well, listen, I don't even have to go there, because what I will tell you right now is just the facts. Just the facts here. Fact. Rome from RBN is now working on building a community library. He is accepting donations, and he is busting his ass to build a library. That is called mutual aid. When Rome is done building that library, will he have won the presidency? No, but neither will have fucking Marianne Williamson. What Rome is going to have for his
He'll
efforts,
be closer to the presidency.
he'll be
than
closer.
She will.
What he's going to have to show for it is a place where people, individuals, children, and families can come and read for free, which is a beautiful thing. What you assholes are going to have is a sticky keyboard from all the cum you shot into it, pitching Marianne 2024. So that's number one. Number two, Nick Cruz from RBN has not only advocated for Shama Sawant's workers' strike back, he appeared and spoke at the launch event this Saturday. So how you can come on here and say so dismissively that, oh, well, they're not telling you what to do. They're not telling you to sit on their hands, but they're not giving you an alternative. That is an absolute lie. Whether you meant it that way or not, you are either talking out of your ass or you're lying. You're lying. You cannot just say things about people that are untrue. I'm sorry. How fucking dare you invisibilize the work that these guys are doing while all you fucking dipshits are doing are sitting at a keyboard coming up with catchy headlines and thumbnail images trying to gin up this joke-ass Marianne 2024 campaign. It's fucking shameful. Listen, you can be wrong. You can be wrong. I think Brianna Joy Gray is wrong about this. You notice I don't have these words for Brianna Joy Gray because Brianna Joy Gray is not an intellectual midget and she's not a shameless fucking liar. And that's what you guys are. And it's really disgusting that you would go up there and just say so dismissively that they're not offering any alternatives. When not only are they offering the alternatives, they're practicing the alternatives. They're practicing the alternatives. And so it's just shameful. It's just horrible. You have anything to add before we finish this? Because we have more. We have more.
We do have more. You know, I don't want to jump ahead, but you know, if you look at this across the board, not just the Vanguard, if you look at who's lining up with the Marianne Williamson thing, and you look at who's lining up with the Kshama Sawant thing, and you couldn't have a better experiment. They launched on the same day.
Right.
And this comes back to what I was saying earlier. It's a class thing. Look at Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore comes out of the working class. All the people who come out of the working class understand that the Democratic Party is a dead end, that they're just going to suck up your money and energy, and they're not going to do anything for you. And we need to build outside.
And Russell was right here. And
Sabby too. Like I see her at the last three organized events that I've been to. I've seen Sabby there.
Yeah.
So to say that these people aren't like actively practicing activism, what it looks like in the modern day.
And the thing is like it's hard, you know, depending where you are. Like, you know, Sabby has to pay money, you know, and travel expenses. You know,
her and her husband drive a lot.
She was recently at the Rage Against the Machine event. She came down for the Free Assange event back in October. She has done activism on the ground in Boston, you know, and reported on it. So, you know, so it's one thing to kind of talk about it. It's the other thing to talk about it and actually do it. And you know, and I kind of made this issue with Indy, you know, yesterday when I was talking to him. It's like such stuff like this that we kind of report on. Like, as I said, you know, the interview that I am going to do later on today that will premiere on INN News later in the week, that's not going to get a lot of views. You know, I'm going to be lucky if that's going to get like 20, you know, but it's not, for me, it's not about the viewership. It's about the idea of at least getting the narrative out there. And if you watch it, great, then you're able to watch it, but it's like the drama stuff. And I mean, we're kind of adding to this, unfortunately, but stuff like this is what's going to get the views. That's when it gets the clicks. That's what the algorithm favors, not the actual work that people are doing on the ground to try and elevate the issues of the working class, which I was telling Indy, it's like, I get why people quit this, especially if they're coming in, with pure aspirations to actually try to elevate the issues of the working class, because YouTube doesn't give a shit about, what it doesn't, the algorithm doesn't favor, people doing activism, unless if they're really popular or if they're connected to corporations or the duopoly. So yeah, it's just very frustrating. And so, but I think for me, what makes it more palatable is people, kind of every once in a while saying, Collin, thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate what you're talking about. We appreciate, what you're saying. So that gives me, some, some hope, in terms of, and that kind of keeps you going. But it does get frustrating that the things that we actually talk about that are more important than like the drama don't really get the viewership as much, or talking about these issues don't get the viewership that they should.
The American news cycle is so short because our attention span is so narrow that people can only pay their attention on like small things at a time. I feel like it's almost impossible for people to step out and see big picture or really talk about like deep thinking ideas.
Right. Yeah, why don't we keep going so we can, because because I think King and Rest will get to my point. In terms of, I believe the second super chat that I sent them, and we could see kind of their panic in real time. So
power and outside movements, and all the people who want to sheepdog their listeners and viewers into the Marianne Williamson campaign, there were all these fucking privileged white kids, man. I'm sorry. Like those are the people who are supporting that. And they might even be doing it in all good faith and honesty. I don't really think that's the case here. Some of them, I think, really, see it that way. But it's because of their class perspective that they can't imagine another way. They just can't think outside of that box.
All right, let's keep going.
During the entire Trump era, it's what Fox News does during the Joe Biden era. They stir up all of your fucking energy and then point it in the direction of nowhere, right?
Again,
Collin, you respond to
totally
me. What
wrong.
YouTube personality that's telling you not to vote for Marianne Williamson is telling you to vote for another candidate that's already announced? They don't fucking exist.
They're not telling you to vote for another candidate, but that wasn't what he was saying. That wasn't Collin's question.
Right.
You're conflicted.
And why does there have to be another candidate? I don't understand why you have to offer up a candidate. Why do we have to do this electoralism thing? Is it really like they said that we could do both at the same time? They didn't say that we have to do both. You know what I'm saying? Like if we want to do just activism, then that doesn't mean that you have to force us to participate in electoralism, like something that we fundamentally don't believe in at all.
Right. Well, not even that. I think just within the space is one thing, but just for a regular person, and what the point I was trying to say before, like I remember when I first started to become more aware of politics, and I remember, this is when I was in Boston, low income neighborhood teaching. I remember it had to be 2016, talking about the election to some of my parents, and basically all of them, many of them that I spoke to basically were like, no, we're not voting. And at the time, I was kind of like, well, why? Like, you have to get your vote out there, and I did the whole thing of like, this is what our ancestors did and like, and fought for and all that kind of stuff. And now as I've kind of matured, like, I get why they don't vote. I understand the disillusionment that people have as far as not voting and not seeing any changes happening to their community. I've made the point, I grew up in New Jersey, just outside New York. every time I go back to my hometown, it's like I'm walking back in time. The way that I left it back before, when I went to college, it looks the same. Like working class town, same buildings that were run down back in the late 90s are still run down. You know, there are like maybe some more luxury apartments dispersed every other block or so. But nothing significantly has changed in my hometown within the last 20 years. And this is
It's either that or they gentrify the fuck out of it, and then they make the real estate massively expensive and unaffordable.
Right. So seeing that, you know, like, why would people be invested in a government or even a local government that is not giving a tangible change that people can see and feel, that they feel like they're making a win and would be more incentivized to be involved in politics? So,
You know, and we're not even telling you to not vote either. If you're gonna vote, the federal election is probably the biggest fucking joke you could ever vote in. Vote locally. Vote for your mayor. Vote for your council. Vote on the votes on the local level. Local politics look so massively different than compared to the federal level that you'd be surprised what the amount of difference that you can make if you look at the East Palestine, Ohio mayor.
right. So, yeah, it's when I voted like back in the fall, because fuck my mayor, you know, I basically voted for the ballot initiatives that were offered and I walked home. That was pretty much it. So I left my mayor blank. So, yeah, there are things you can do. It's just the things that Vanguard are talking about is not popular. You know, it's a lot easier to talk about you know, politicians in the federal level, which I think that's kind of the attraction, you know, like in this country, which I kind of get.
It's vanity. That's why I'm saying it's vanity, because like that's the fucking joke, is the federal level,
right? When the focus should be more on locally.
Yeah.
But anyway, keep going, because it's kind of a little pressed for time.
Conflating two things. You're conflating two things. First, you said they're telling you to do nothing, and then you're saying because they're not telling you to vote or who to vote for, they're telling you to do nothing. Those two things do not compute, my friend. I'm sorry. Maybe you haven't taken, you know, 9th grade logic yet, but
lip service to guys like Chris Hedges, Cornel West, Shama Sawant, a bunch of people who can't or will not run for president. Right?
No one's floated Chris Hedges, Shama Sawant, or Cornel West for president. No one has floated that. No one has floated that. It's not about, listen, you're getting, whether you like it or not, unless somebody drops dead between now and then, you're getting Joe Biden, Ron DeSantis, or Donald Trump, January 20th, 2025. Maybe this phrase rings a bell. Grow up. Grow up. Because that's who's going to be president. One of those three people on January 20th, 2025. So you guys are stuck in this fantasy world of YouTube ratings. You need a show. You need a narrative for a show. That was the monologue I put out, you know, whatever it was, 2 days back. Kyle's putting out a video a day on this Marianne thing. They're getting a lot of views. He's already off to the races about it. That's what this is about. But it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy. That's all it is.
And also, they're raising this was the Crystal argument. Okay, you don't want to get behind Marianne Williamson. Fine. Why can't you do your thing and we do ours? Okay, you know why? Because when you try to line up the left behind some prosperity gospel, new age hippie, it discredits all of us.
Yes.
It plays to the worst stereotypes of what the left is and what the left is about.
Right.
You get some rich, new age California person to represent us. That's almost as bad as being represented by Nancy Pelosi. It plays to all the worst stereotypes of what the left is. And you have to be really ignorant of the working class to think it's a good idea to put somebody like that forward as our avatar.
Pause.
Right.
For 1 second.
Absolutely.
I think that's
Let's
a
keep
fair
going.
characterization too.
Yeah,
It's an Nancy
that-
Pelosi.
Clip that.
I've always said she's like an AOC. This is like if you're trying to push AOC for president. I don't see any difference.
Right. And Russ made the point right there. Like, by pushing like this rich white woman who may know about our issues, I don't want to give her credit, but like at least she talks about progressive issues. But what is that based on? You know, is it based from actually seeing the despair in working class communities and committing to do something about it? Or this is essentially, as you said earlier, a vanity project, you know? And her voice is not representative of mine. That's the issue that I have with her. And I thought about this last night. It's the idea, like, a lot of these politicians, more often than not, especially on the federal level, like in a few cases, like, are not battle tested in terms of doing anything statewide or locally. You know, they're not necessarily city councilmen. They're not mayors. You know, like, it's just, oh, I have money, so I'm just able to run for president. You know, it's not the idea of like elevating someone from the local level and elevating them up with a proven track record of actually getting shit done to that. So, okay, Marianne has a couple of mutual aid organizations. Okay, so what? You know, what has she done?
Didn't they get a van? Didn't they buy a fucking like actual pedo van to I'd imagine the purpose is to like interview on the local level?
Yeah.
Of some sort?
Yeah. So it's I mean to me, not to say that's irrelevant, but it's the idea of, you know, like, again, it's just entertainment for them. And it's the idea of like they're taking money from you, from me, for entertainment versus taking money from where that money could be better spent elsewhere, which is what Nick from RBN challenged Marianne on. Is like, if people know that the system is rigged, why should they invest in you when they can much easily and more effectively use that money towards something else that has more tangible results? And Marianne couldn't answer that. Basically, she was like, if you don't believe that, don't vote for me. Okay.
It's really as simple as that. Her foreign policy sucks too. It's like, we have to be honest about that. And we're living in the most like contentious geopolitical times of our history. So,
Abiding, thank you for this.
I think it's fairly
appreciate you.
But yeah, thank you, Abiding, for the dollar. That's $1 less to the Vanguard. So that's 1/10 of the money refunded back. So back in good hands.
Let's keep going.
But they really, I mean, and I'm not sure when you want to get to this, but they really like demonstrate the point of this Marianne hyperfixation, like, or at least a problem with it, because they don't even know what worker strike back is. They have to fucking Google it on the spot.
Right.
By placing all of your attention, and it's similar to what Keaton said, Kyle putting out these daily like headline Marianne videos every single day for the purpose of Vanity. They're serving, you know, attention driven away from things like worker strike back and actual on the ground movements, which, you know, will get less views but carry a way more importance than whatever this bullshit candidate they're gonna like. She's gonna get crushed, and it's really just gonna be a huge letdown for the. I mean, we'll hear them in a year. They have a year, so we'll find out.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Like I said, not done. A few more minutes of this.
You tell me how that's good fucking strategy, Collin. Collin, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're behaving like a mark.
Like this is that is Zach is the most like insufferable.
Okay, I'm a boomer.
At
but
least
what-
Gavin doesn't say shit like that. Like,
I'm a
this is
boomer,
what
but
pissed
what's a
me off.
mark?
But honestly, Zach, can you? This man paid you money. He paid you $10, and you're gonna say shit like that, dude. Come on, like at least like intellectually approach him honestly. You're not giving any faith to this whatsoever. You think you're fucking right out of nothing.
Yeah, and
Real
also
nice way
Marianne
to treat a
Williamson
guy who
has
just gave you $10. Like, even if you disagree with him, like, do we talk to the super chat people like that? We had a super chat person ask what I thought was a flawed question earlier. Did I say, well, that's fucking stupid, man? Yeah, thanks for the $10, but you're really fucking dumb.
over and over again engaged in these direct mutual aid grassroots organizations.
Now this guy starts pitching Marianne as a mutual aid warrior. These guys, I gotta say, they're on script. I'll give him that. Maybe she should hire them as their the campaign press secretary. That would be fucking hilarious. I'll tell you what, if she hires these guys to be her press secretaries, I might throw the campaign a few bucks just for the comedy, just to keep it going.
Yeah,
look at
long time
keep
now.
going.
Just to keep it going, at least until
I
New
don't think her
Hampshire.
running for president in the Democratic Party is somehow at the expense of third parties or mutual aid, especially because she's suggested and hinted that she might run as a third party candidate if the DNC screws her.
Stop. We've already debunked this.
100%.
Stop.
100%. So shout out to you, Collin. Really appreciate that. I'm sorry we had to swat down your argument there.
You can swat down anything. You're a moron. And what an obnoxious way to treat a viewer,
Somebody who gave you money.
$10 and had a thoughtful, honest question. Collin wasn't done. Collin decided to throw a little tip on it, and this was my favorite part of the whole thing. Here we go. You can see his question. When are you guys going to talk about Shama Sawant's kickoff? Because the Workers' Strike Back movement launched on Saturday, March 4th, same day that the Marianne Williamson campaign launched. So Collin's saying, when are you guys going to talk about that? Here's something we're offering up. Okay, fine. Yeah. You say we're offering nothing? We're offering the Shama Sawant Workers' Strike Back movement. Do you have anything to say about that? Let's take a listen.
When are you guys going to talk about Sawant's kickoff? We covered the Sawant, when she launched her entire new program, she decided that she was going to leave Socialist Alternative. She wasn't running for another re-election in city council. We covered that. So yeah, shout out to you, Collin. We already beat you to the punch there.
No, again, totally obnoxious. And again,
they don't even
totally
know what he's
untrue.
talking about.
You don't even know what he's saying. He's referring to the article that she put out in the Stranger magazine announcing back in, I think it was January or something.
How long ago was that? That was so long ago. How is that's his response?
It's like,
this is the question where you really got him here. You really got him.
She was going to form this movement and that she was going to quit the Seattle City Council at the end of her term. He thought that meant he covered it. All right, done. Let's go back. Let's see who Russell Brand is posing for selfies with now and make segments out of that. We've already done the Shama Sawant thing once, and it probably didn't do very well in terms of view count, so who cares? Snoozers, right? Let's go back to our gossipy bullshit show. All right.
Let's go back to who said what about whose cousins, uncles, nephews on Twitter.
Exactly. All right. So here's how this goes.
Yeah, we talked about the Workers' Strike Back thing when like Zach said, she decided not to run for re-election in Seattle and started Workers' Strike Back. I'm still not 100% sure what Workers' Strike Back is.
Oh, he did a great job covering it then. That was a killer segment you did on it a couple of months ago. Yeah, we covered it. Yeah, totally. What is it again? Are they going to run candidates? Are they going to run anybody? We're obsessed with running candidates for president.
Is he auditioning for the Bill and Ted prequel? Is that what's going on?
These fucking pompous pricks, dude. As soon they spent 10 minutes bashing you about how apparently how wrong you are, and then as soon as you bring this up, they're like, oh, what is that again? What can you enlighten us? Can you just let us know can you just remind me what that is?
Yeah. We don't have to play the rest because I think the damage is done here. But we're good. But again, and we'll play a little bit of this because basically the idea was I wasn't talking about when she announced her kickoff. That was a few months ago. I was talking about the actual kickoff that happened last weekend that also coincided with Marianne Williamson's presidential primary challenge. So, and if they did their research, and I have to wonder if they knew this but just wanted to ignore it, or if they were just blatantly ignorant of it, they would have known that Nick from RVN, the very people that they were like, oh, they're not offering anything, spoke at her rally in Seattle. We did talk about it on INN News, just before. And again, just want to shout out Due Dissonance. Thank you for having my back. Really appreciate you trying to make sense of what I was saying in like a limited character limit, on Super Chats, being able to fully flesh out what I was trying to get through the thick skulls. But let's show the alternatives that many of us are trying to advocate for. So I do want to give Nick some love, and I haven't seen all of it, and we're not going to play all of it, but just to give you an idea of what Nick was saying. The volume, unfortunately, on this is not that great, but Nick, you'll get the gist of it. So you can go ahead, Greg.
What's poppin'? I need to move the microphone. Let's go. What's poppin', my friend? My family, great to be here. Yeah. Test. My name is Nick Cruz, writer, activist, co-founder for Revolutionary Blackout Network, where we debunk mainstream corporate propaganda and discuss strategies to increase the power of the workers. Which is why, with Workers Strike Back, what Sean, what you guys are doing, is so important to give people an alternative to this rigged electoral politics game. So now we're going to bottom you guys. We live in a capitalist dictatorship where you guys believe it or not. You want to know how I know? You can predict who's going to win an election at around a 95% rate based on who has the most money.
That's right.
That's right.
How's that democracy? Did you vote for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party breaking the rail strike? No. Did you vote for that? No. Did you vote for endless military spending that makes record profit for breaking on the boat? Did you guys vote for that?
Hell no.
Did you guys vote for the record amount that is going to ICE, DHS, that is going under, in the Biden administration, not Donald Trump? He's spending more money on ICE. Did y'all vote for that?
Hell no.
So, now let me acknowledge that we live in a capitalist dictatorship. How do we approach that? What is the answer? It's time for workers to strike back. That's right.
I think people really underestimate the power of, especially like indie media, or at least like if you're going to be any sort of micro internet celebrity, managing to coalesce your audience around going to events like this,
right,
is so incredibly powerful. You just look at what happened in DC. If you get these large, if you get any relatively large speaker with any somewhat of an audience, you can get people to appear, like real life people to appear at these things and get actual action on the ground.
Right. And here's the thing that I have with this regarding, the rally, the Rage Against the War Machine rally. And I tell people, I'm not a fan of Mick Varna. I've said that many times. I wasn't particularly a fan of who was featured. at the rally. I've said that many times. But as I say to people, the left / independent media, like people in this space who really care about anti-war, should have had an event like that months ago. If we were better in terms of, instead of sniping at each other, and I think in a way that's done on purpose, is to kind of ostracize people in these little cliques. And especially now, like, I think like Jimmy Dore is now the boogeyman. Like, it's basically like those of you who, it's basically like the seemingly Jimmy Dore stands and those who are not, you know, that.
And if it wasn't Jimmy, it'd be someone else. I mean,
right.
look at like Steve Tulsi or
that,
libertarian Scott Ritter.
Look, and here's the thing, like, you and I went, I think, out of principle. It was the idea of being anti-war. We didn't like.
And I'm going to the one on the 18th too.
Right, and like, which no one's talking about that one. You noticed that, right? Like, people were heaving and hawing over the Rage Against the War one, and I'm kind of like, okay, are you going to promote this one? Crickets.
Oh, and this one has more people that like I disagree with the PSL shit.
Right.
Like, that bothers me, but I'm going out of principle just to scope it out and just to see what it's like. Maybe I'll catch video of like speakers or something, but like I don't know what's going on. I'm just going out of pure curiosity.
Right.
So I mean,
but these are the things that Vanguard are not going to talk about. These are the things that the larger channels are not going to talk about. Hell, Kyle, who's allegedly a fan or, like a proponent for Medicare for All, didn't even mention the march. He said it in passing, and then he got the information wrong. So it just kind of shows that they're not serious about this.
They're not even paying attention. That's the worst part of it. They don't give enough of a fuck to even like know enough.
Right. And as we need right now, like, we need labor to coalesce together to actually make demands so that we can be a more unified force to make politicians afraid that if they don't do what we ask them to do, then that means they're out of a job. That's what we need to focus our energies on right now, not to kind of play. And people are like, oh, you don't have to hope for Marianne, but what she's doing is valid. Okay, but as Russ said, the energy will be taken away from people who are actually trying to coalesce around the idea of like, we must support Marianne, and that is what is pissing me off, so yeah, so again, long of it regarding Vanguard, because I'm done with this, and then we're going to get to the other part where I'm going to tap into your brain a little bit more. I'm not going to give Vanguard a super chat ever again. Okay.
Good.
All right. Like, I'm making that stance right now. I'm not doing that ever again. If they want to have, like, I don't want to say debate because I'm not a debate me, bro. But if they ever wanted to have me on, and I've changed my mind on this because initially I was like, I'll never go on the Vanguard. But like, if they're going in good faith to actually have a conversation, I'll be willing to do it. I'll make that stance right now. If they're willing to have me on to have an actual conversation regarding real issues, regarding like the reality of what people, who are actively working on the ground are doing, and why people are disenchanted with the idea of like running, like trying to do anything electorally, I'll be willing to do it, but I wouldn't do it if they're going to pull like what they did to Aaron Mate type shit. I know Indy's like, no, like I'm going to do that, so I'm not worried about it. But I'm making look, I'm maturing in that sense of like, because it's the idea of like, being able to say, something to kind of counter what they're saying, so at least the idea of like we need to coalesce around labor is actually getting more out there versus these larger channels trying to push electoral politics.
And you know what? They're young enough to the point where like they can be saved. I think. I think with a little bit of convincing, they can be saved, which is essentially what we're trying to do. We're trying to, save
Who are you talking about?
Vanguard.
Look, if anything possible, sure, but I think their principles and priorities have to change. But I mean, in order to do that, then they have to risk the access that they currently have to actually speak on the right thing. And as of right now, I don't think they're willing to.
I guess I'm most likely just trying to serve the purpose of trying to change minds at least.
Oh, we got some people in the chat. We got Savvy here.
Pasta.
At least we had Due Dissonance here. I'm assuming this is Pasta. Shout out to you, Pasta. Thank you for tuning in.
I should have said hi to Pasta at the rally.
Yeah, so
I missed him.
But yeah, let's get into the actual part I'm going to need your help with because so once upon a time over a year ago, when I started INN News with Reef. I hope this got clipped properly. I'm not sure if
just give me the timestamp and I'll go to it.
It's probably around. Geez, oh no, I have to check it now. But I'll talk while I'll try and clip it properly. Not sure.
I have it.
Okay, good. All right. So last year, those of you who remember, there was a whole lot of mess. People were talking about like Kyle and some of the larger channels of being like, oh, you're being nihilist. Like, in terms of like, just sitting on your hands and, not wanting to do anything. And one of my first rants on that was I read an article written by a professor from MIT by Nolan Gertz, who wrote this article, What Nihilism Is Not. And I remember, like, this is when I knew of you, but I think this was one of the times that I started to get to know who you are. And I remember you being in the chat, and I remember you kind of saying some things. There you go, like, I think your chat is right there in the screen, and since coming to know you, like, I know you've dabbled in philosophy. This is kind of your thing. As I said in this clip, I failed philosophy in college, but funny enough, I was a theology major. So you figured that's kind of the similar bent. And I did well in theology and not
it all kind of comes together, honestly.
It does.
History and
but I wanted to bring this up again because people are getting the term nihilism wrong, which was the point. It's like you're misinterpreting what nihilism means because it's not the idea of not doing anything and just being in despair, which was the point that I made last year. So I want to play some of this again. And then you have another clip that you shared with me yesterday that I think kind of tracks. I think speaks more on the political side. This article is just more on the general aspect of nihilism. So we're just going to go back down memory lane for me reading this.
How long ago?
It was a year ago.
It was back 9 months ago.
Literally a year ago. But yeah, let's remind ourselves what nihilism is. Okay. So
I love philosophy. I failed algebra. So
I did fail philosophy. So I have the definition here, but even here, for me in my little brain, it's, well, according to the dictionary, a viewpoint that traditional values and beliefs are unfounded and existence is senseless and meaningless. You kind of make, well, it kind of makes sense to me, but it doesn't. As I said, it's more of a philosophical term. And then during the prep last night, I actually found a good article that I think kind of explains it better than probably what I ever could. And so this article is from Nolan Kurtz, who is connected with MIT. And I think he gives, and I didn't clip the whole thing just for time, but I think there's enough of it to just kind of share, you know, just to encourage people, you know, you're not nihilist, you know, in thinking the way that you're thinking. You might be other things, which I think would be a more accurate definition, but a nihilist is definitely not the term that really, that you people.
Thanks, Keaton. The money's back.
Yeah.
We got it back. Thanks for the refund.
Thank you, Pasta, for the super chats. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Pasta. Thank you, Keaton. All the big boys came in today to save us.
Should be using. So I'll just read the article real quick. So the article, and we'll link it at some point, you know, if you guys want to read the whole thing. What nihilism is not. So nihilism, not unlike time, according to Augustine, or porn, according to the U.S. Supreme Court, is one of those concepts that we all are pretty sure we know the meaning of, unless someone asks us to define it. Nihili means nothing. Ism means ideology. Yet when we try to combine those terms, the combination seems to immediately refute itself, as the idea that nihilism is the ideology of nothing appears to be nonsensical. To say that this means that someone believes in nothing is not really much more helpful, as believing in something suggests there is something to be believed in. But if that something is nothing, then there is something to be believed in which case believing in nothing is again a self-refuting idea.
Yeah. In the
next slide.
Next slide. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. It is easy, therefore, to fall into the trap of thinking everything is nihilism, which of course leads to thinking nothing is nihilism. Thus, in order to preserve nihilism as a meaningful concept, it is necessary to distinguish it from concepts that are often associated with it, but are nevertheless different. Concepts such as pessimism, cynicism, and apathy. Nihilism versus pessimism. If optimism is hopefulness, then pessimism is hopelessness. To be a pessimist is to say, what's the point? Pessimism is often likened to a glass is half empty way of seeing the world. But since it's only half empty, this scenario might still be too hopeful for a pessimist. A better scenario might be that if a pessimist fell into a well, and if someone offered to rescue him, he would likely respond, why bother? In the well, out of the well, we're all going to die anyway. In other words, pessimism is dark and depressing, but it is not a nihilism. In fact, we might even go as far to say that pessimism is the opposite of nihilism. Like of nihilism, pessimism could be seen as a rising from despair. The fact of our death, the frustration of our desires, the unintended consequences of our actions, the tweets of our political leaders, any or all of these things could either lead us to either a nihilism or pessimism. However, where these two roads diverge is over the question of whether we dwell on our despair or hide from it.
And next.
To be with a pessimist is to know that you are with a pessimist, but you can be with a nihilist and have no idea. Indeed, you could yourself be a nihilist and have no idea. Such a lack of awareness is the point of a nihilism, as nihilism is all about hiding from despair rather than dwelling on it.
Yeah.
Okay. If, as the author suggested earlier, nihilism and pessimism are opposites, then nihilism is actually much closer to optimism. To see the glass as half full is to think that we should be happy with what we have rather than focus on what is missing. But being happy with what we have can also be a way of remaining complacent, of ignoring what is missing so as to avoid having to seek change, or maybe in this case, not being willing to make alternate plans. Similarly, to believe that everything will work out in the end, that there is always light at the end of the tunnel, is to believe that life is teleological, that there is some goal or purpose, whether God or justice, operating invisibly behind what we experience. It is by believing in the existence of superhuman goals and superhuman purposes that we lose sight of human goals and human purposes. Likewise, when we elevate someone like MLK to the status of a saint or prophet, we see him as more than a mere mortal, thus freeing ourselves from the responsibility of trying to emulate him, since we simply have to be hopeful that someone like him will come again. If optimism leads us to be complacent, leads us to wait for something good to happen or for someone else to make something good to happen, then optimism leads us to nothing. In other words, it is not pessimism, but optimism that is similar to nihilism. Cynicism, like pessimism, is about negativity. However, whereas pessimism is about despair, about the feeling that life is pointless in the face of death, cynicism is instead much more about disdain than despair. A cynic wouldn't say that life is pointless, but would just say that what people claim about life is pointless. A cynic can even enjoy life. In particular, a cynic can take pleasure in mocking those who claim that altruism exists or that politicians are self-sacrificing public servants, especially finds laughable the idea that we should try to see the good in people. Pessimists are not a nihilist because pessimists embrace rather than invade despair. Cynics are not nihilists because cynics embrace rather than invade intensity. A key part of evading despair is the willingness to believe that people can be good, that goodness is rewarded, and such rewards can exist even if we do not experience them. But to a cynic, such a willingness to believe is a willingness to be naive, to be gullible, and to be manipulated. The cynic mocks such beliefs not because the cynic claims to know that such beliefs are necessarily false, but because the cynic is aware of the danger represented by people who claim to know that such beliefs are necessarily true. The cynic presents itself or herself as a realist, as someone who cares about actions, not intentions, who focuses on what people do rather than on what people hope to achieve, who remembers the failed promises of the past in order to avoid being swept up in the not yet failed promises about the future. The idealist, however, rejects cynicism as hopelessly negative. By focusing on intentions, on hopes, and on the future, the idealist is able to provide a positive vision to oppose the negativity of the cynic. But in rejecting cynicism, does the idealist also reject reality? You can stop here. And so all of that, I think, yeah. So again, I talked about all of that last year. So again, you have the brain to think through all of that, or at least you have some thoughts. So
it just bothers me because the way that we paint all of these ideas in such broad strokes it's very similar to how we kind of paint politics into two camps, either liberal or conservative, because really these ideas are based on a spectrum and they can mean completely different things to different people, and it's really like a fundamental definitional misunderstanding. I remember writing my 400 level dissertation on Nietzsche, but this is a lot of people like to call Nietzsche a nihilist, but this is basically like his form of nihilism. Nihilism is basically meant to act as a bridge for societies in order to refashion themselves. He saw society and humanity as a moral, malleable thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that in order to go through these periods of time, that it's actually inevitable that we as people become nihilist, because that's the point of which, and he describes it here, but Nietzsche is sometimes dismissed as a malevolent figure, obsessed with the problem of nihilism, and he says God is dead. But understandably, these ideas are unsettling. Few of us have the courage to confront the possibility that our idols may be hollow and life has no inherent meaning. But Nietzsche sees not only the dangers of these poses, but also the positive opportunities that they present. The beauty and severity of Nietzsche's text draw from his vision that we could move through nihilism to develop newly meaningful ways to be human.
So it does track in terms of the article that I read. It's not so much the idea of like, and I don't want to say despair because nihilism is not necessarily that, but is what you choose to do from that.
Yeah, I mean, really. So really, I mean, it's a different form of existentialism. Really, I mean, it's sort of creating your own meaning, in a sense.
Right.
Um,
Like both parties are traitors. I think he kind of says it appropriately here. I think in this case, like nihilism is repeatedly voting for Democrats, hoping they'll do anything that benefits us when they never have and they never will. So yeah, it's the idea of like the optimism that people can have, like in as far as in the article it says like you're putting your hope in a person, which basically kind of has you sit on your hands and just kind of do nothing. That's the actual nihilism, you know, not the idea of like people being angry or being like, oh, we don't want to do this, because there are people who actually want to do something, you know. So
right.
it's the
People just don't understand what nihilism is. It's like
right. It's the idea of hiding / the idea of like, or in this case, not listening to what the alternatives are politically, to actually move people out of that despair, but remaining complacent or just being willing to just be like, oh, we're just going to do this over again and hope that it actually works in our favor this time. You know, that's more the nihilism standpoint versus what we're doing is saying, again, we're not sitting on our hands. We're not telling you not to do anything. It's just the idea of doing something. And I think, Jeb X, I just want to kind of shout out to you because you mentioned, I replied to one of your tweets, episode 50 promo tweet. Does this fine thumbnail for the video? Maybe you can advise on what to do. I feel like, I'm wondering if you're asking what to do as far as electoral politics or like how to counter that. That's why I asked him, but I have to check back and see, and I'll try to respond to you if you're still here. But I think really it's the idea of like, look, focus locally, focus like, and that's the thing, like, do you know who your council people are? Like, start there, figure out who are the people that are involved directly in your town or city, find out who they are, learn who they are about, find out what policies or things that they're promoting in your city or town, and then activate it that and become activated that way. You know, figure out like, because I say councilmen because they can generally control your town or city's budget, like, and see if there's any organizations, you know, in your town or whatever, you know, that you're able to, you know, like kind of uplift some of the issues within your community. And not even that, you don't even have to do any of that, you know, like use your gifts in terms of if you're able to volunteer in your town, if you're able to like do something, you know, like the idea of like these politicians is to spend money. Send your money to them, which it will go to the DNC. Like, put that money into, if you have that money to spend, put that money into something that will help serve your community. So it could be a soup kitchen, or it could be like donating stuff, like whatever you're able to do, you know, and then be creative. Like, if you have
your form of action can look however it looks like to you. I mean, someone could be doing art or music or, like I said, cooking if you like to be a chef. A lot of these things are like, you know, pretty much malleable to your personality. Whatever you like to do, you know, there's always a way to benefit your community with
right,
it.
like put that money where people are going to directly benefit from. You know, if you're going to do that, or if you're going to use that money, you know, use it to do something to help, at minimum, help your neighbors. Oh, like if you know, like, first of all, get to know who your neighbors are. Because we live
Really,
in
I would simply put like our definition of nihilism of realizing that, you know, there's no superhero coming to save us.
right.
That the power is in our hands as people. to have to rely on these, superficial characters with these like pumped up online personalities like Bernie Sanders or Marianne Williamson. Instead, we could take the action ourselves, and people don't realize that, and that to just completely hyping up this mommy or daddy character to come in and swoop in and they're coming to save us kind of attitude it's foolish, really. It's just logically inconsistent with the reality of where we're at today.
Right. So like take the idea is, and I say this all the time in the news, like we talk about, having workers take back the means, of the, we say take the means of the narrative, get your power back to the workers, so there's the idea of like, what are you able to do instead of relying on politicians in the hope that they will do something? What are you able to do in terms of like trying to help people who need it, like that's where mutual aid comes in. That's where like, you can see it in your city or your town, what the needs are. Try and figure out like if there are organizations that do it, connect with them and do it. If there's something that you can do on your own, go ahead and do that. But try and do things that will tangibly and immediately help people's needs. It doesn't have to be big. And many times it could be very small, but use your money that way. And I feel like if enough people do that, then people will start thinking better about society and then just in their life experience. And then, like it just helps elevate the human condition a little bit better. So this is the last clip we wanted to play, and you brought this to me because I didn't know you want to do this, but you brought this because it kind of tracks. So basically, the nihilism article we talked about was just on a more general standard. This you brought me is kind of more on the political bend, correct?
Yeah, I feel like this really kind of demonstrates the point.
Okay,
that you're trying to
so
make.
I think you can play from here.
Let's watch this last clip and then.
Okay,
and
then you could talk a little bit more about what you saw in this that resonated with you.
Right.
Of my family, and that involved a rejection of communism, not rejecting a faith in God, but rejecting faith in many other things, including rejecting a faith in different economic abstractions, different beliefs about economics that help to define the communist worldview. So coming to the definition of nihilism as rapidly as possible, we can do it through a contrast of atheism versus nihilism. So here's slide 1. Atheism can be approximately summed up with the phrase, quote, "I do not believe in God," close quote. But more precisely, this means there is nothing to be believed in this category of things called God or gods, etc. Now, why is that clarification meaningful or useful? We'll make the comparison to someone who refuses to use fluoride toothpaste because they find the scientific argument for its advantages unconvincing. They could be accurately described as stating, quote, "I do not believe in fluoride," right? So their position is not that there was no such thing as fluoride to be believed in. They just specifically do not believe in the scientific rationale for using fluoride. And yeah, as the photographs show here on screen, there are significant numbers of people who have that belief or have that lack of belief. So contrasting atheism and nihilism, we have to emphasize again, atheism alone does not reject communism. Atheism alone does not reject, for example, the belief that you could meet and speak to the ghost of your deceased grandfather. Atheism alone does not reject transcendental meditation, reincarnation, or junk science claims about health and diet, such as the 100% meat diet. So atheism is a very specific and narrow rejection of one type of belief. So whereas the atheists say there are no gods to be believed in, nihilists say there is nothing to be believed in. And we can narrow down this category of nothing just a little bit. There is not anything in the category of things that this society presents as ought to be believed in, or perhaps there's nothing in the category that any society could ever present as ought to be believed in. I wouldn't believe in any of it. By way of illustration here, it's easy to tell yourself If I had lived in Nazi Germany, I wouldn't have believed in any of that stuff. Although the quality of the scientific and political arguments presented by Adolf Hitler were abysmally poor, the human tendency to believe whatever society presents as ought to be believed in is very powerful, even with reference to an extremely poor work of literature like Hitler's Mein Kampf, or most of the major religions' textbooks. Think about living in communist China right now. Think about living in post-genocide Canada right now. I think it is true that nihilism entails that you live in a sort of state of constant rebellion or constant friction with the society that you're living in. However, the extent of that rebellion, the nature of that rebellion, is going to be very different in different social contexts. It's not going to be the same in Canada in 2019 as it would be in Saudi Arabia, communist China, Hong Kong. And it's not going to be the same in these social conditions as it would have been in Russia back in 1917, where really, rebellion against the Bolsheviks of any kind was immediately risking your life. It was immediately a life or death struggle with ideological extremists. However, it's really false to presume that this state of rebellion is a negative, self-pitying resignation to your life being miserable and terrible and bad. Poor little me. It's not like that. It's not like that for most of us. It's not like that for most of us who come on the internet and talk about nihilism. And by the way, I get fan mail from people for whom nihilism has been a really positive motivating force in their lives. I get fan mail from people who discovered nihilism from my YouTube channel and then went off and read a bunch of books and then send me email telling me what a positive thing nihilism has been in their lives. So again, it's easiest to imagine with a foreign, repressive, faraway culture like Saudi Arabia, that living in a state of rebellion against the ideological underpinnings of your society, living in a state where you refuse to believe in the justifications for your society, not just religious, but underpinning the economic system, so on and so forth, that could be a really positive, liberating, motivating thing in your life, where you feel driven to do something better than play out the role you were born into. You feel motivated to rise above the conventions of the society you're in, to move beyond the constraints of the beliefs that define the culture that to you is most familiar. As I say, maybe you would move beyond the constraints of any culture or every culture. I don't know. Maybe if you took someone out of Saudi Arabia and they went to live in Switzerland, they would find conditions in Switzerland good enough that they wouldn't feel that same tension. But the tension can be productive and inspirational. So to give one example from my own life, I've said this many times. For me, living in Canada really is morally tantamount to living in a hypothetical Germany where the Nazis won the war, all right? Canada is built on genocide, all right? And I refuse to accept that. I don't believe in any of the excuses or rationales. I don't believe in any of the justifications for that genocide. Now, how did I cope with that tension? Well, I didn't choose to move to a cave in the countryside and isolate myself from society. I respond to it in a somewhat productive, somewhat creative way by trying to learn Korean Ojibwe. At one point, I was actually enrolled in a university, getting a university degree in Korean and Ojibwe as languages. And I saw a future for myself in Canada where I was working in language education and research and revitalization efforts to try to prevent those languages from going extinct. So that was ultimately a kind of productive, meaningful response I had. However, I did that believing in nothing. And I did it precisely because I reject the belief system of the British Empire, even the belief system my own parents subscribe to, the kind of ersatz belief system the whole society is based on, where they ultimately have to believe in their own goodness, the goodness of their society and their own lives, notwithstanding the fact that it's built on genocide and that genocide is still continuing and they're still participating in it and they're not doing anything about it or complaining against it. So based on that rejection of beliefs, on a really kind of nihilistic basis, I threw myself into learning Korean Ojibwe with a passion, and I saw a career path where I could do something that's kind of humanitarian and meaningful, reacting against or rebelling against the society I was living in. That's a completely different set of motivations than someone who, for example, someone who believes in the ghosts of their ancestors actually existing, someone who uses hallucinogenic drugs at a powwow in a tent, has visions, and then decides on the basis of a pious adherence to the religion of their ancestors on the basis of a spiritual experience, who decides on that basis to go to a university and enroll in courses studying Korean Ojibwe. So as you can imagine, when I was a student of these languages, I would have contact with people who had very different belief systems, very different motivations. Obviously, you can also meet people who are communists or far left wingers and want to get involved with.
He didn't mention the. You must have missed the part where he talked. There was an actual like nihilist party in Russia in Soviet Russia at one point, and really it's really kind of just to draw out the contextual understanding of like what nihilism actually means in a political sense, at least.
But the way that I think his name is Elzel Mazad. I think that's the name of this guy. I had to look him up.
I'm not sure who this is.
I think that's what he's saying. I did search on him yesterday when you sent this.
Here's another like popular channel. I mean, this is like kind of like an op channel, but still.
But
like
the idea of what he's saying, which I can kind of get, is the idea of nihilism is rejecting essentially the status quo. Like, and then like it's more like, to kind of simplify it, is the idea of like you don't buy into what is essentially being force-fed to you, you know, and then like the idea from there is like, do you choose to go with it or do you choose to counter it? At which he describes that tension, you know. So I think, you know, and I think just for like, and I think we can see this on the left in terms of, you know, people know what the issues are. Even like the people who, you know, are a little more privileged, they know what the issues are, you know. And I think all of us feel that tension, but it's a question of what you choose to do with that tension. And are you willing just to kind of go off and kind of do your own thing and try to do something on a more alternative means? Or are you just going to just kind of fall in line with what is expected? And I think the danger here is that there are people who know the issues who kind of might acknowledge, yeah, I understand what you're going through. I understand the reality of what many people go through, but then they kind of turn around and say, but we still have to do this. You know, that's kind of like what Crystal said, you know, a few weeks ago in terms of saying, you know, like, just let us do this. Just let us, you know, like, vote for Marianne or support Marianne, you know, like, just let us do that. Because in a way, she's trying to run from the idea of like people are actually trying to do something on a more alternative means that does not necessarily reflect her values, and she's hiding from it. So in that, actually, she is being more nihilist than the people who are saying that and I think that was the point I made last year, which is still the point now. That kind of attitude is more nihilistic than people who are actually trying to do something, in the people who are saying, oh, we're sitting on our hands, just saying we're not doing anything.
Well, this just really just paints the irony of them calling us the nihilists.
Right.
Because being an anti-capitalist fundamentally means that you are a nihilist. You reject the current ideals or status quo of the system. You don't believe in the American dream, or that America's the greatest country, or any of these status quo ideals that we were grown up and essentially indoctrinated to believe in, and kept doing so through mainstream media like MSNBC and Fox News, and getting pulled into the same narrative that everyone else is in.
Right.
It's nihilism at its front is really just a rejection of ideals, and whatever context you put that in, you can't just call someone a nihilist and say like, oh, they believe in nothing. They think nothing matters. They think that's like that's like a very like 101 level understanding of like what nihilism is.
Right.
Nihilism is
people feel things. They may not feel or care about the things that you might like, which I think goes more into being more apathetic. But like,
it doesn't have to mean apathy though.
Right.
That's
but it's like, we may be apathetic towards that thing, but we may have feelings towards something else.
Right,
like,
right.
Just because you're apathetic to one thing doesn't necessarily you're apathetic to everything. And I think the same thing can be true as far as nihilism. And as both the article that I stated and what this guy's saying too, it's a form of optimism. You can even be a nihilist in terms of just going, you are aware of the issues, you're aware of the struggle, you're aware that tension. I think especially being in the space, you feel that tension. But then the question is, what do you choose to do with that tension? Are you just going to be like, oh, whatever, or are you actually choosing to do something about it? Like that, which is a lot more challenging, but it's based out of a hopefulness. But it's choosing to do what is a question of what do you choose to do with that hope that you have? So
it's creating your own meaning out of a meaningless thing,
right?
Essentially, finding alternative, an alternative, challenging solution to whatever the current society is operating on. Whatever context you want to put that in, whether it's scientific, political, whatever. But
I think maybe this may be the last part, but Ashura in the chat is asking, and again, I don't know these terms very well, but what about doomerism?
Doomer is just a meme. It's like a play on boomer. They I don't know when this came. I think it came up in 2020, but there's bloomer, doomer. I'm pretty sure doomerism is that. I think it's pretty much just a meme. I'm pretty sure, but I think that's describing the pure apathy kind of sense of we're all fucked. There's no point.
Right. Which again,
and I think that's a misunderstanding. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, as I said with apathy, I could be apathetic in terms of if you give me a choice of where to eat for dinner, I could be like, I don't care, whatever. I could be apathetic to that, but I could be very passionate in terms of what flavor ice cream I want to have for dessert. So, so it just kind of depends on your personality, what are the things that you care about versus the things that you're just meh, whatever,
for example, I'm a vegetarian, right? You could call me a meat nihilist. I don't believe in eating meat, which I recommend everyone in the chat to go on Netflix and watch the documentary Cowspiracy. So that, just to get a good idea, but so I fundamentally I reject the idea of eating meat just for myself personally. I don't care what you do. And that doesn't mean that doesn't mean I don't believe in eating. That doesn't mean I don't believe in food or nutrition.
Right.
I'm a meat nihilist, not a food, not like a food nihilist.
Right.
These things are so contextual. You can't just paint things with a broad stroke like that and then pretend to know what you're talking about.
Right.
But
yeah. Anyway, I think we're
you got your interview coming up. We got a lot of stuff coming today.
I have enough time because I'm not doing it till later on this afternoon, so that's fine.
Are you recording or are you doing it live?
No, it's a pre-recorded. So
okay.
So we're good.
So
but
keep out.
But yeah, so yeah, guys, thank you. So like I said, this will probably be the only time.
We got the money back.
I'm not going to give them that money ever again. Okay, all right.
No, the Vanguard refund fund came through.
But as I said, in a way, I think this was a good lesson for me. Because there's a reason why I'm called Care Bear. Because it's but I tried in diplomatic faith to kind of challenge what they were saying, and they had their talking points down and swatted it down. But I think we just kind of proved, look, it's not about, at the end of the day, as I said, having Marianne run really has no value on my life whatsoever. And I think that's what a lot of people are saying. Having her run is not going to change our current circumstances right now. So really the question is,
she's not even going to get the primary.
Right.
She's not even going to get it.
But you can say that for any politician at this point. It's like they're not going to do shit other than like what their corporate masters are basically telling them to do.
They're running Biden. They're going to run Biden.
So, so really the question is, what should we be doing? Separate from them to get wins, like even if it's a little win, like what can we be doing to ensure that the left has a win, and it doesn't have to be big, but it's like the idea of a win will lead to something bigger. So I think, Vanguard can do whatever they want and say, and we're going to kind of do our own thing. But I hope, you guys, and it seems a lot of you guys here are kind of wised up to what they're doing and whatever else.
It's like I said, they're in the wrong space. Go get a fucking studio.
Yeah, it sure is.
If you're gonna be like us and use $50 microphones in our apartment rooms, then talk about like real shit. Like don't go ahead and like if you're gonna want to be mainstream news, go act like it. Go be like Breaking Points.
Right.
Go get a job at Breaking Points.
So I'll give you guys an opportunity, right now. Like as I said, I am going to pre-record an interview with a colleague and close friend with the organization that I'm a part of, that talks about basically we advocate for teachers in DC because I'm a teacher. That's what I do. That's my way of challenging the establishment. We're talking about how to retain teachers in the field. That interview more tonight, I think will be.
We got. How do we miss that tonight at 10 p.m. Guys,
yes.
Check that out. We got a full content day for you here at.
And then So watch out for that interview that I'll do. It will probably premiere it on Thursday, I think. And then our normal INN news, I'll be on with Reef on Wednesday. Probably be on at 9, I think, unless we have a guest. I don't think we'll have a guest this week. But we'll just check us out on our Twitter at Kennedy News. Find me in Crab. indienews.network. Find our links below. Check out all of our other peeps in the network. And thank you for being my emotional support as I
got you,
get this off my chest. And as I said, we're done. Obviously, this will be the only time I'll talk about Vanguard, and we'll go back to my regularly scheduled stuff. All right.
All right.
All right.
Have a good